And away we go. Welcome to Cosmic Divide, episode 30. It is the second mid-tournament Cosmic Divide episode that we're doing. This weekly thing is pretty interesting. Somehow it's worked out where we're right after group stage, before playoffs, and
Boom,
then
boom, boom.
right before finals. It's kind of nice. Hopefully people are not getting tired of us talking about Masters Shanghai. But yeah, how you doing,
Masters
TMV?
Shanghai just got interesting. I don't know what you mean.
Just got interesting. Wow.
Mm.
Okay. So you're on the
That's not, I'm being harsh on FPX. FPX were interesting in the
okay.
group
Fair.
stage.
Fair.
The
Fair.
rest is
Fair.
kind of...
Yeah, it's been a little. No, I'm just kidding. I've actually enjoyed a lot of the games. I think it's been pretty interesting. There's been some cool storylines. It's been fun to watch some of these teams that people didn't expect have runs, and some of the top dogs maybe being little
So top
dogs now.
dogs, yeah. Small little dogs.
Small little dogs, exactly. Is that
Anyway,
okay to say? Should we be calling them piggies in honor of
oh
Boostio?
yeah,
Small
maybe,
little piggies.
maybe. Before we get into anything though, you have something to say.
Oh yeah. So we've got one more day on the Yaza giveaway. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pin the comment real quick. Make sure you've entered if you haven't already. Giving away the desk essential. There it is. Commented. Giveaway. Pinned.
1 day left. You might as well just do it now.
Yep, 28
Free
hours
desk,
left before we
why
pick the
not?
winner. We'll announce it on Twitter and probably at the next episode as well. And yeah, that is the housekeeping. TMV, take us into our first topic.
Okay, we're gonna start before we get into Master Shanghai. Like the first time we did this, like when Master Shanghai was just starting, there was loads of roster news, and then there was like a bit last week, and then I think there's like even less now, but still things are happening.
Yep.
Let's start with the MEA, where Gentle Mates. Now it's interesting. I've put bench whalers here, but I read the VLR article and it actually said that the final like starting roster is uncertain. So I don't know if they have benched anyone necessarily, but they have signed a player called Cadavra. Now, obviously, again, I'm not too familiar with the tier 2 scenes, particularly in all the different EMEA regions. I like that this guy sounds, his name kind of sounds like Kadabra, the Pokemon. I kind of dig that. But Gentle Mates may be making a change, or maybe like long term looking to make a change. Thoughts on that idea, just in general?
Yeah, so I mean, this guy has been in and around the French scene for a long time. He played for Vitality and Alliance back in the day. Was a duelist player, if I remember correctly, originally. I don't think he's playing duelist for this team, or won't be, because they already have the tank and Takas, obviously. So probably just looking to add a bit more firepower, which this team needs. Honestly, it's we've talked about it a bunch during the season. Natank and Friends has kind of been what this team has looked like a lot in the league, so they definitely need a little bit of help. And yeah, who knows? Maybe he won't start. Maybe he will. He's been pounding in tier 2 as tier 1 players tend to do when they're down there. So maybe he is good. We'll see.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, obviously, whenever we're talking about like some tier 2 players that we've never seen really play before, it's difficult to comment too much, but I definitely agree. And again, as we've kind of mentioned before, obviously the Ascension teams, there's like a clock on them, so
Yeah.
perhaps they're more likely to make changes than any other team, I suppose, in a way, if they're underperforming. Speaking of teams close to home, though, Gentlemates are somewhat close to my home, I guess. Friends is fairly close, I suppose.
Yeah, but you don't like their
Globally.
bundle or their colors or anything about them.
No. In fact, I almost have a rivalry with them solely for their logo. But a team even closer, sort of, than them, and certainly closer to the heart, Wolves. Wolves Esports have released Coldfish and have signed. I mean, it's classic China here with another bizarre name that kind of made me laugh when I first saw it. I think it's Siu Fat BB.
Yep. Sufat.
Yep, which is certainly a name. And apparently Siu Fat is going to IGL for Wolves now. It previously was Plix, I think.
Oh, interesting.
I think it was Plix.
I think I did hear
And
that he was IGLing at least for part of it, and it might have
yeah,
been somebody else even before that. So
yes, possibly. But this new guy is gonna IGL. Obviously, again, I mean, you seem to have at least some knowledge of Cadaver. I would be surprised if you had any knowledge of some Chinese tier 2 players. Although, again, according to the VLR article, this guy was playing with Spring on, was it
NIP?
NIP? Or, yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was NIP. So there's some connection there. Maybe that will help Sprung again. But we'll have to see. Do you know anything about Chinese tier 2 teams?
No, not really. I mean, I do remember watching him play during the Ascension
Okay.
tournament on
Yeah.
NIP, but I don't
hmm
really remember much about how good he was. I just remember the name.
Okay. There you go.
But I mean,
Speaking.
Wolves, they came in. We thought they were going to be pretty good, and then they looked kind of shit. So they.
Yes. Yes, the kickoff was kind of a bit of a tease where it was like, oh, they got unlucky, you know, should have beaten EDG, which is obviously a big thing for any Chinese team. We'll get to EDG later on, but and then stage one didn't go that great, so not great. Speaking of teams though, we do know more about DRX. Obviously, they dropped Stacks. We talked about that last week, but we didn't know who exactly they were going to bring in. Was it going to be someone new? Was it going to be Flashback? Well, it is Flashback. Now there is questions. Obviously, Stacks was IGLing. Uh, People seem to suspect that it will be Bane who will IGL for this team.
Mhm.
I don't think that is confirmed anywhere. I don't think anyone truly knows, but that seems to be the general consensus of what will happen. Obviously, Flashback when he was playing, we did see
He's
him
good.
earlier on in the season. Yeah, he looked good, right? He looked like a good player. So overall, then, all of these players. They've replaced Stacks with Flashback. Someone's going to IGL. Knowing what you do, is that a good move? Do you think they made a good choice there, or do you think it'll be about the same, worse?
Um, yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to say because I think that Flashback looked very good.
Mhm.
I thought his contribution was a nice one to the team before he had to step away for personal issues or health issues or whatever it was. I can't quite remember. Um, and then I was kind of worried, and Bane came in, and he also looked really good. My main question is actually not so much the IGL stuff. My
Mhm.
guess was that it was going to be Bane because I heard that he was quite vocal um, from I think it was Chobra or Paper Thin or something like that talking about him as a player. However, Bane has played mostly smokes for the team. Flashback has played a lot of Viper for the team. Mako is also a smokes player and a Viper player for the team.
FBX man.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
FBX.
maybe maybe they're leaning into the triple smokes meta. I mean,
Yeah.
Flashback has also played quite a bit of Sentinel, which I think this team kind of has lacked as like a who is their
Yeah.
actual Sentinel player. So that does make sense that maybe the roles will work out a little bit better. And then Bane has kind of played a wide variety of things. He's played a bit of the initiators and stuff as well. So I
I'd
assume they'll
assume he'd
probably,
take, yeah,
yeah, I assume
Stax's role.
he'll take Stax' role. But it'll be interesting to see how that works. You know, it's very risky, right? You're putting a lot of pressure on a team that maybe doesn't have the most experience now, which is weird to say about DRX because obviously they have Buzz and Maka, but the other three guys have never really done anything in their careers, and so it's going to be, is it going to be the new blood doesn't feel the pressure because they don't really know what pressure is like, or are they going to feel a lot of pressure because they're stepping into big shoes that need to be filled and high expectations for the team?
See, it's so odd to me because, during this whole off season, I feel like there was two very distinct camps with DRX, right? There was people who were very much keep the roster, just innovate a bit more, change change things internally, but don't change any personnel necessarily. And then there was a lot of other people like, no, they need to make a roster change. They need to freshen things up. They need to ship some players out. And I think there was a big, there was two kind of sides to how you wanted to see DRX. Obviously, now they've made three changes, right? So that we are looking at a very different team at
Yeah,
this point. Obviously, they've done it in stages, but it's a very different team to the team that was before. And I mean, obviously, the weird thing about this change was that they still did have success, right? Obviously, they didn't go to Masters Shanghai, but they had a flawless season in the regular season.
Right.
And so they're set up anyway for a decent chance at getting to champs, right? Like obviously, they'll only need to win a couple games, and they might even get, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen the same way, right? Where we're going to get the 6 teams in playoffs, the top 2 will get a bye. So DRX, should be in a decent spot to do that, again. And so it's going to be interesting. I mean, and then if they don't qualify for champs as well, obviously that would be seen as a that would be interesting to see what would happen from that point. Having already made all of these changes. This to me, like, because of what I've just said, because they seem so likely to get to champs had they just stayed the course, this does seem to me like a bit of a risk, right? Like, I mean, in Flashback, I assume was probably already under contract. That if you wanted to make this change based on, if you made it to champs but didn't do too well, like, that would make maybe a better timing sense, to make that change then, and have a full off season together and do that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a risk, but I can understand that if DRX are thinking like, we don't just want to settle for making tournaments, we want to win tournaments. I don't think this is the worst idea in the world, because I don't think that the DRX, the DRX that they were going to win a tournament. So if you think you need to get younger and with more firepower, and that's how you're going to do it, I can see that, right? Essentially, they've kept the 2 highest firepower members of the old team, and then they're adding in a bunch of, kind of younger, maybe more aim players, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I also will say that, like, I know that a lot of people do rate Stacks very highly as an IGL, but I feel like late in tournaments, I never really felt like he was out calling the other team.
Yeah,
it always seemed like if it was Stacks against FNS in like a upper bracket final, I would almost always pick Energy to win that game, and type of thing. So
the DRX way.
Yeah.
Tough. Okay, that's DRX, and then finally in Pacific, Team Secret obviously made quite a few changes. They let go of their coach. They benched NDG and they released Borkum.
Yep.
I hope I got that right. Now they have added their players. The assistant head coach Dummy is becoming the head coach, which we've seen.
What a terrible name for a coach.
We've seen quite a few examples of that where the assistant becomes the head coach, which does, I feel like that's interesting, because you're not, like, how much is changing? Yeah, like, obviously it could change a bit, but if you're, I guess they've made player changes as well, so this one, quite a lot could happen, but I'm thinking of, like, like with Navi, how much and with like Vitality, like how much are you really changing if you've got all the same players and a coach who was already there?
Yeah, I mean, same IGL. It
yeah,
is.
it's like, how much is
not
really going
true.
to change? I don't know. But with Team Secret, at least, they have made multiple roster changes as well, so this could be a big change. And they've added 2GE, who is a name that people might recognize, was kind of an RRQ 6th man. You did play some. I'm not sure if he played this year. Did he play this year? I think he might have.
Maybe at kickoff.
He definitely played last year. A significant amount last year. Yeah. And a guy named Wild Oreo. Oreo? How do you say Oreo? 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 Okay. Yeah. Well, you're American, and I think Oreo is American, right? So I'm gonna go with Oreo.
It's a bunch of fat and fake sugar stuff between two cookies, so it sounds pretty American to me.
Yeah. Now, interesting for me, I just quickly looked at these guys' VLR pages and what they play and stuff like that. I did notice that, like, they kind of don't have a Sentinel player if they're benching NDG. 2GE was mostly a smokes player. This Wild Oreo guy, I think, was mostly an initiator player and had not played any Sentinel. Obviously, you got Jesse Vash, who mostly plays, initiators. You've got Envy, who mostly plays initiators. So it seems like one of those 3 initiators and will probably play Sentinel. Do you think Jesse Vash is going to go to Sentinel? And
I hope not. He's kind of like the Sova wizard. Like, it's kind of his thing is being supportive utility.
But that's what I mean. Like,
that's not the easiest switch, honestly, to go from initiator to Sentinel. It's like quite a different mindset. Maybe if you go from like a Viper to Sentinel, or like an Anchor Smokes to Sentinel, or even like a Jet Op to Sentinel, that's a little bit easier. But
I mean, yeah, but I'm just checking this guy's VLR, and like, if you go all time, he has played most Viper. Somehow Viper and Raze are his most played agents by a lot, which is kind of weird. But he's played 2 games of Cypher, 1 game of Killjoy. And like for perspective, he's played 58 games of Viper, 53 of Raze, 28 of Sky. You know, like it's a varied mix, but like Cypher and Killjoy are literally at the bottom of the agents that Wild Oreo has played. So this is what I mean. That's kind of like no obvious like, oh, this guy will be the Sentinel guy for us.
Maybe they're just gonna play Sage and Deadlock in every map, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, maybe that sounds like a good idea. Do it, Team Secret. If you want to get featured on the Thinking Man's Valorant YouTube channel, that would be a great way of doing it. Yeah. I would instantly make a video about that.
There you go. Free
and
press.
Maybe multiple. Free press if you want it. And I generally praise teams, even if it doesn't work. I take a positive spin on teams that try
energy. Leviathan.
Well, they didn't deserve much positivity, as these teams we're about to talk about won't receive too much positivity either, because first, as we always do, we're going to talk about the teams that got eliminated from Masters Shanghai from when we last talked, which is 8th through 5th. And we can go probably quite a while on some of these teams, because there's kind of like big stories of like what should this team do next. There's some stories to get through here.
Let's start. And they don't really have time to do anything is the problem, right? It's more so like looking into the prospects for champs in the offseason. Yeah.
But let's start with EDG, who came in as the China #1 seed and disappointed. You know, let's. I might even be being kind to disappointed here. That might be too kind of a word, because they didn't win a single map. They had one close map, I think, against Paper Rex. The bind was close against Paper Rex, 13-11, but other than that, it was 13-6. It was against Heretics, 13-6, 13-3. So they got stomped on 3 of their 4 maps. They played 1 close map against Paper Rex, and obviously they are playing against top 8 opposition, right? And 2 good teams, right? Well, we'll get to Paper X, but 2 pretty good teams. So it's not going to be easy, but you get stomped. You don't win a map. You're at home. What are EDG? I guess is my first question. Like, what even are they at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think one other. This might be a little bit. It is hyperbolic, but it's worth saying. I would go as far to say that Dragon Ranger Gaming showed more improvement throughout the tournament than EDG did. I think that DRG looked really bad at first, and they kind of stepped up and showed that, maybe they can like hang with a little bit more time. I have lost all of my faith in this team. I do not think that this team... we saw the winds of change coming in China. Like FPX started beating them like fairly consistently. It went from being EDG would always win against FPX. It would be like 2-0s, and then it was 2-1s, and then all of a sudden FPX won a series, and then they beat them again. And so it's clear that there's been a little bit of sort of like a changing of the guard. I mean, EDG went back to full-time Kong on Duelist. They had been doing this thing where he was playing a lot of Initiator and Smoggy was playing full-time Duelist, and it wasn't working out so well, so they went back to Kong on full-time Duelist. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, like, he still played pretty well. Like, he's still really good. But it didn't work, and he doesn't seem to have quite enough help, if I'm being honest. He feels like the weight of his responsibility to carry the team at all times. I think that's pretty obvious. In this Paper Rex bind game, they had, let's see, Kong had 8 first kills, Smoggy had 5, nobody had 3, Haodong had 2. So they had, 18 first kills out of 24 rounds that were played.
Oh my goodness, and they lost.
Which is fairly unacceptable if you ask me.
Holy, that's bad.
But yeah, I have some notes on my phone, so let me just pull this up real quick. Give me your thoughts on EDG, but I watched all the press conferences. I don't know if you've been doing that.
No, I'm too tired.
But there are some pretty interesting things that EDG was saying.
Okay. Whilst you get that up, I'll just talk about, the first thing is DRG actually won more rounds against Heretics than EDG did, and that was in the
Mm,
game that DRG got stomped, and they won more rounds than EDG did. It was 10-9 to be fair, but that just goes to show how far EDG got stomped in that game against Heretics as well. And for me, like the thing that I think is very maybe this is the most concerning thing. Like if you want to believe in EDG and like the 5 players that they've got right now, and you think they can, as a 5, turn it around, they don't. Other than Kang and maybe Smoggy very occasionally, in this kind of level game, they just don't pop off
yeah,
like they did last year.
yeah.
Right? Like when they were playing last year, like everyone on the team would pop off. When I remember the first tournament that EDG made, and people like me, and I remember like Mimi from Pletchat as well was like big hyping up EDG because on the VODs you just saw like, okay, yeah, there's some problems here, but all of them are mega cracked. Like all
Hmm.
of them can aim insanely well, but you just don't see that anymore, right? You just don't
Yeah,
see like, oh, here goes nobody just got a 4K. Wow, super impressed. Oh, Chichu, whoa, what a shot by Chichu. Like, you just don't get that. Like, it's
yeah.
just not there. It's not a part of their game anymore. Like when they play against this level of team, which to me is like, well, if you're not doing that, and then your discipline isn't that good, and your strategy and your macro and micros aren't that good, well, yeah, you're just gonna get stomped, right?
Hmm.
Like you're not even gonna be in these games, which they aren't, right?
Yeah,
So, like, of all the teams we're going to talk about, and we'll talk about some other big name teams, that people are talking about, oh, should they make a roster change or whatnot? Like EDG is the one to me where, yeah, sure, maybe there isn't enough time because we're going straight into split 2, and they might not have time to bet in a new player or whatever. But when it comes to next year, I would be, unless they have a miracle champs run, I would be insanely surprised if there wasn't roster moves on this team. I'd be
yeah,
very surprised.
yeah. I mean, the obviously the two main targets would probably be Haodong and Nobody. I think
Yeah.
Nobody has really fallen off in terms of performance, and to be fair, his play style has always been like insanely high risk, high reward for an initiator player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Haodong went like a total of like -30 at the tournament. Uh, Obviously, I played 2 series, but yeah, I think he was -30 across 2 series, something like that. Um, Second lowest ACS out of everybody at the tournament. Obviously, he's the IGL, so it's like kind of acceptable, but not really. And then he's down near the bottom of stats as well, which is not good. Um, yeah, so I do have these notes as well. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think that this team has to change their roster. Like if I have no hope for them this year. They'll probably make champs, but they're gonna go out in 2 series again, I think. Um I just don't think this team has any real good prospects. Like if Kong Kong is still playing well, Smoggy's still playing relatively well, but they're just losing. Like their fundamentals are just like bad now, and I don't know. They're just like not a good team, like straight up.
Yeah, yeah. They didn't
Um,
do anything well. Go on, give me these quotes.
okay, so this is from Kong Kong. Originally, this was a question that he was asked by I think Chinese media, and he basically responded. I think they kind of just like asked him like what he thinks is the problem with the team. I think, or like what is the problem with like his performance, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said that he doesn't really feel like he's playing like himself anymore. He's kind of like lost his identity as a player. Like he knows he's good with the op, but he's trying to play with his team more, and so he's rifling more. And like he thinks he's pretty good with the rifle, but he knows he's better with the op, but he also wants to like play with his team. And so he's like kind of like stuck in this weird limbo where he's trying to like be a bit more of a team player. He's playing a lot of Rays, obviously, and that's a bit more of like a team oriented character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he just like isn't really. He doesn't like feel kind of like the identity of like the special fire that he had before, I guess. And then so I thought that was kind of interesting, and I have seen that honestly. Like I thought it was super weird that they took him off the op for most of the season so far. Like when he was playing like KO and stuff, it'd be Smoggy that was opping. I'm like, bro, like you have like the best opper in the world on your team.
Yeah.
Why is somebody else playing with the op? Um, But then also the coach said something interesting, which I think maybe you and I have discussed in the past as well a little bit, which is that this is from the coach after, I think that's his name.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He said that they've been like trying to innovate and they've been trying to like, figure out new stuff, but they don't feel like they actually can test it in the Chinese league. Like they don't know whether their ideas are good or not by the time they get to the international lands. And so they're trying to innovate and they're trying to show up with good stuff, but they just don't even know whether what they're doing is good. And they're kind of just like losing their identity as a team. And I think that is fair. Like, when you look at their players, they just hard gap like everybody in the league outside of FPX basically at every position. And so even if your ideas are shit, if you just shoot people better, like you win rounds. And that's kind of what's been happening. And to me, it seems a little bit weird that maybe they can't just like only if it was me, and maybe they're already doing this, I don't know, but if it was me, I would only scrim Pacific teams. I would make that my goal, is I'm only going to scrim Pacific teams. I'm not going to scrim any Chinese teams for the rest of the year. And hopefully you can just like scrim, but maybe some of the Pacific teams that are going to go to the lands don't want to scrim them because they know they'll play them there. So I have no idea, but it's a hard spot to be in.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like you would think that, that's kind of one of the things that the Chinese League and the Pacific League kind of have maybe a slight leg up on EME and Americas, right? Because, there's another tier 1 league that you can scrim and you're not, obviously internationals, you might play them, but, it's not like guaranteed and it's unlikely, right? And especially for the games that they'll be playing in their leagues, right? Like it's fine. So yeah, and look, I mean, if like last year, I know that like people were like, oh yeah, we can't scrim EDG because we're gonna meet them. Like if you're Paper X, you're like, oh, we're gonna meet them deep in a tournament. This year, you're not thinking like if I was Alex from Paper X, something like, well, we might play EDG in the group stage, but like who cares? We're max playing them in a group stage game.
Yeah,
it's what I would be thinking. So it's fine. Yeah, right? Like it's not the end of the world. Yeah, because it's a struggle right now for EDG. Any more quotes?
No, it was just those two that I took notes of. I did see an interesting question in chat actually about what is the fourth team at Champions? Like there's a guaranteed fourth team from China now, and if we're looking at Chinese performance so far, I mean realistically it's going to be Trace.
Most likely Trace.
They probably should have been at this tournament, to be honest.
Yeah. Trace are like a solid enough team to where they should be top 4, like just in general. They're just like a steady, solid, one of the few like steadiest teams in China. So yeah, I'd be surprised if it wasn't them, to be honest. But it's so interesting for EDG, isn't it? Because like, I guess that we can probably like that will happen during the off season, that they will probably make a couple changes. They probably will pick up. I would guess they're going to at least try, if they're serious about winning, which I think they probably are. They're probably going to try and pick up some of the best players from a DRG or a Trace or someone like that, right? Like
the first thing I'm doing is I'm trying to buy out Aeon. Honestly, I think Aeon
really
is insane.
I see. I'm not sure the FPX would. I don't know. This is a bit of like would you wanna? I mean,
I hope it doesn't happen because I want FPX to stay together and keep playing and getting better. But Aeon has clearly been the best initiator in China, and it's not even close all year. And so if I'm EDG and I have tons of money, I'm gonna try and go buy that guy, like 100%.
Yeah, I mean it's so weird, isn't it? That like obviously EDG technically finished above FPX in this tournament, but like the way that you feel about both teams, could not be more different. Like could not be more different. Like I have so much hope for FPX, and I really think they have a very good chance of making out of groups of champs. Because obviously everyone starts in groups at champs, right? And then there'll be some weaker teams there as well. The 4th seed teams or whatever will probably be a little bit weaker as well. So you're like, and I would assume that FPX would go in as the 1 seed most likely, and so I would assume that the groups will be seeded, and therefore they won't have any other 1 seeds in their group. So they should have a good chance of making it through. And I'm feeling so good. And like, Berlin was so good at this tournament, and Lysor turned up, and it's like, and everyone else on the team we know is pretty good already. So it's like, I just feel so good for them, and their strats seem to have an edge to them, and it looks so promising. And then you look at EDG, and it's like they look like a walking zombie.
Yeah.
They're a zombie team just waiting to change, essentially, and just waiting to be put out of their misery. It seems like, um, which
Yeah,
is
and I mean,
sad. It's sad.
it sucks because like I like this team, and like obviously everybody loves to watch Kung Kung play, and like you can tell he cares so much. Like he was crying afterwards, like walking on the stage, like you can just tell like yeah, you want them to do well, but
Yeah,
roster changes have to happen sometimes. So
yeah. Because this is the thing. Like, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it later on. But when Pacific win the tournament, and it will be when, it will be when.
yep,
Then we're just on that Chinese clock.
yep.
We're just waiting for China to do it too. And then the four nations can live in harmony. You know, and then one of them will become the Fire Nation, and then
It'll
we'll
be
go from
North
there.
America because North America is full of drama, and it'll be North America. Trust me.
Yeah. Speaking of sad teams that were better last year than they are this year, let's talk about Fnatic.
Hmm.
Now, this one is an interesting one as well, because
Yeah.
like what let's start there. Let's start with diagnosing the problem. What
Actually,
is Oh, go on.
before we go into this, for all these teams that we're going to talk about, that if they were in the seeded into the playoff bracket, let's talk about whether they would have made it out of Swiss stage as
Okay,
well.
EDG
So
would not have.
EDG would not have made it out of Swiss. I agree.
Fnatic,
We can talk about it after we talk about their problems.
well, okay. But tell me what is Fnatic's biggest problem though? In your mind, what is Fnatic's biggest problem? Because obviously they went out without winning a game. They lost to GenG in a close game, and I don't think
Mhm.
anyone after that first game thought really any less of them. I think that people probably just thought, oh, you lost a close game against a good team, like, okay, that's fine, right? But then they lose to Foot, and so is it that they just, in reality, did they just have one bad game against Foot, or is there problems here?
There's definitely problems here because this has been
Okay.
a downward trend for this team. Like this is the team that won 2 international tournaments last year, came fourth at champs, and even the fourth at champs was like, if it wasn't loud that they played twice, right? Was it twice that they lost aloud? It
They
was,
only
right?
lost aloud in that tournament.
Yeah. If it wasn't loud that they played twice, this team probably goes to the finals, for being honest. And if they play
Yeah.
EG in the finals, it's maybe even a FNATIC finals. So they were very close to sweeping the entire season last year as far as international lands go. So to go from that to where they are now, which is missing the first land, getting to the second land, and showing, wow, maybe they're back, maybe, and then going out 0-2, and like, sure, they had to play GenG in the first round. That's pretty unlucky. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That's a pretty unlucky matchup because
This is
everybody
literally as hard
knows.
as it can get. I
Yeah,
mean, because
everybody knows at this
GenG are
point.
favorites to win the tournament at this point. So
Yes,
you
yes,
you 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 played the best team,
yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah. That's unfortunate. I also think stylistically, GenG matches up very well against Fnatic because they both kind of play a little bit more disciplined style, but GenG also has like this extra kind of gear to them that I don't think Fnatic has at the moment. Um, and then you go into a regional matchup, which is like, yes, it's Foot. Yes, you are probably a better team than Foot, but regional matchups definitely do play a role. Like anybody can win those just because you probably have scrimmed each other a bunch, you know each other really well, you've been studying each other for the entire year. So I wasn't surprised that they lost a Foot, honestly. Um,
The system wasn't surprised.
the system wasn't surprised, but I also wasn't surprised, just like in general. So it's kind of an unfortunate two matchups, but also at the same time, they just didn't play very good Valorant. Like against GenG, it was a pretty good match, but against Foot, they were just not good. Like Durko was good, and everybody else was not good.
Yeah, I mean, see, to me, like the first map, and the first map was split, and that was the map that kind of convinced me that, oh, Fnatic are somewhat back. Maybe not all the way back, but they're somewhat back because this split looks really good.
Yeah, their
Like
split was nice.
when they were playing in EMEA in the playoffs, it was like, wow, this split looks really drilled. It looks like they have a very good idea of what's going on. They don't make a ton of mistakes. They seem to have a really nice. They have good plans. They execute them well. And on against Foot, who split is one of Foot's best maps as well, they destroyed them.
Hmm.
Right? They destroyed them, and it was like, yep, Fnatic. And I, I remember thinking after that map, like, okay, go home, Foot. Right? Like you had a nice little run here. Go home. This
Yeah.
game's over. Right? This game's over. Don't worry about it. And then,
Especially going into Lotus, which has been Fnatic's just like
yes,
home ground forever, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But and again, I do have to say, Foot, I think on Lotus, um, and on Ascent as well, Foot did. I was surprised. I wouldn't have thought that Foot would have had necessarily the mentality to, get destroyed on map one facing elimination against Fnatic,
Yeah.
and be able to just like turn up and be like, no, we can do this, and we've got this. Don't worry, because they come out in the first half of Lotus and they win 9-3. And this is always like, I do think, with some of these maps, right? Sometimes it's like, if you pick certain maps, like if you pick Lotus, you better know how to defend. And if you pick like Ascent, you better know how to attack, right?
Hmm.
Because you are playing that side for 12 rounds, guaranteed.
Yep.
Like if the other team isn't trolling, because like you just should, right? You just should pick attack side if you can on Lotus, almost always.
Hmm.
And yeah, and Foot punished them for it. And they win their attack side, and then they're able to close out the defense as well. But then Ascent is where it really fell apart, and that's where again it's kind of like a bit of a surprise that such an experienced team,
Yeah.
like you wouldn't expect them to fall apart in map 3 of an elimination, right? You normally we associate that with teams who haven't been to internationals before. That's where they kind of crumble, under the pressure. But Fnatic, you would think like of all the teams, they've got more experience as a 5 than literally any other team. And they just like that Ascent. And look, Ascent has never been a good map for Fnatic. I remember
Yep.
all of last year being like,
Yep.
why don't teams pick Ascent against Fnatic? It makes no sense. This is
Yep.
clearly the worst map that they don't ban, like by a mile, right? And teams didn't for some reason, and it always drove me crazy. So it's never been a great map for them. But that's no excuse for like how bad it went. Because
Yeah.
there was certain rounds in here. I mean, I did a video about it, and they did get. I do want to say they were unlucky in some of these rounds as well. There were multiple CNED op kills through smokes,
Yep.
right, to start a round. There was,
Yep.
I remember, around a post plant where they get. Oh no, it was one of the defensive rounds where I think Alpha just gets randomly spammed. He's back on B site, like deep on B, and he just gets spammed through the little wood on like where the boat is,
Hmm.
and dies, and that opens up the round for Foot, and it's like, and it was just a pure random bullet that hit him in the head. It's like, what
I
is going
think
on?
I think on that one that you're referencing, he actually was spamming back.
Oh,
I think that's why he got shot through that, because I remember it being like, how the hell did he die in the back of Boathouse through the wood? And I'm like 99% sure that he was trying to
okay,
get value spamming somebody on Switch and got
okay,
spammed
that
back.
makes more sense
Yeah.
because I remember thinking like, how? That's just unlucky. But there was definitely some rounds in there as well where it's just we look lost. And look, you're never gonna win a game. Boaster went 2-15. Chronicle went 3-16, and two of those kills came in the first pistol round.
Yeah.
So like obviously you're never ever gonna be. Even Leo went 5-14, right? Like these
Yeah.
are we we barely showed up on this
Yeah.
map. Like we weren't even shooting back, right?
Yep.
Like let's start like well as you said, like for about EDG, like if you're not gonna shoot back at all, like yeah, you have no chance. Right,
Yep.
and Boaster caught a lot of stick for his performance, but I didn't see people talking about like Chronicles got 78 ACS
Yeah.
playing KO. He's
He had
not
a
IGLing.
bad
Like,
series overall. It was not
yeah,
good. But
yeah.
also, I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody was calling for Boaster to be cut after this, which is like insane to me because, like, yes, his fragging hasn't been there, And last year was maybe a bit of like an anomaly in his career as far as like his fragging was pretty good. But even before that, like Fnatic was doing well and going to international tournaments and doing well at them when everybody was still saying that he was like not a good fragger, right?
Yeah.
So they can win when Boaster isn't getting kills, and it shouldn't be his responsibility to get kills. I
Yeah.
think what really failed them is their discipline. I thought their discipline has been atrocious almost the
Yeah.
entire year. And specifically, like I don't want to, like point, flame at players too much, but I think that Alfeir in particular has been extremely undisciplined this year. Like he's just constantly he's letting like the Turkish aim take over. He's just like swinging through smokes alone constantly. He's in spots where all he has to do is just tuck and let his teammates come in and like rotate to his site, and he just needs to anchor the site and just like play his life, and he's just taking a 1v4 and dying and giving the entire site away, and it's just happening constantly. And like I know he's an insane player and his mechanics are incredible, but he's every single, it's like there's the decision tree. It's like here's the high risk option with high reward, here's the low risk option with maybe a little bit lower reward but probably more consistent wins, and he's always taking the high risk option, and it's just never paying off. And like this is almost one of the situations, kind of like the EDG scenario, where it's like last year they were just diffing people and getting rewarded for bad habits, and it kind of feels like that's maybe what's taking over here.
100%. They are little Skinner's rats getting reinforced for like all of last year. They were getting reinforced for awful decisions.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and how many times on commentary did we hear commentators say like, "Oh, they just won the round, and look, Minnie's complaining again. What's he complaining about this time? They won the round." It's like, well, this is what he was complaining about. This is what
Yeah.
all the complaining was for. This is why he was looking angry, because they were making awful decisions but just getting away with it.
Yeah.
Right? Like and now we are seeing the other side of it of like what happens when you don't get away with it. You
Yep.
lose.
Yep.
Right? And this happened all of last year, right?
Yep.
You know, especially Alpha. Durka can be guilty. He wasn't as guilty in this foot game where he did have a good game. You know, it is tough, and I think yeah, it's just there's just like it's like for Alpha in particular, I think he just needs to not be a hero, right? Some
Yeah.
rounds are already won. You
Yeah.
don't need to win the round.
Yep.
The round is won. Just play normal.
Yep.
You don't need, if you're in a 5v3, you don't need to go and lurk to win the round.
Yep.
The round is won if
Yep.
you just play it safe. Like you'll be fine, right? If you just stick with your team and trade, done. The round over, you know? But there are so many times where he's like, I'm gonna make the play that wins this round, and you don't need to, right? There are
Right.
certain instances where you need to take that time in, but he's just going for it constantly. And I think the problem is like if you're playing, you know, more of a looser style, like if that's just kind of, you know, we'll get onto Paper X in a second, but you know, if you are a bit more Paper Rexy and that's kind of just how you play it in general, and you get a lot of good from that, and sometimes you get some bad from that, you know, that's a philosophy thing. That's like a decision to make. But Fnatic clearly aren't in that style, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fnatic are in the we are going to play, you know, like perfect, like, you know, percentages. We're gonna, you know, do everything by the book stuff. So when you're trying to play that style, but then you've got players not doing that and doing the opposite of that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when it goes wrong, it's gonna look really bad, which
Yep.
it did in some of these instances, because it's like you've just got certain people
Your
doing the
game
complete
plan is
opposite.
entirely predicated on like holding the gaps, not letting anything crumble, and it's just like you have like one person just randomly swinging and losing your entire defensive setup like instantly.
Yeah,
At the beginning of
it's
the
like
round, it's impossible to play the game.
so let's talk about Fnatic a bit more then. Like going forward, what would you do if you were Fnatic? Are you staying the court? Like if you were Alma Putty right now, what is your thought of like, okay, we've just had a terrible loss. Let's be real. You know, we
Yeah.
expected to do big things. We haven't done it. We have to get going again for split two. Our split one performance, you know, what did Fnatic finish? 3-2 or something, right? It wasn't amazing. You know, so it's not like they're even in the, you know, in the clear to make, you know, high end playoffs for champs either. Like that, and they're not going to be that high on points, I wouldn't have thought either, you know, to make it for champs. So what's
Yeah.
your like what are we doing? Like, what's your overarching plan of like? Because they play a game in 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks, Mister Speaks. What
That's so crazy how condensed the schedule is. That
what
it's
are we
like
doing? You got 2 weeks.
fucking hell, man. Um, I mean, I think the first thing I'm doing is I'm probably just focusing on the bright spot of Durka because
Mhm.
like he has been. We talked about it last week. He's been kind of underperforming this year by quite a bit, and he was such a bright spot at this tournament where I was just like, oh my god, he's back. Like this is the guy who was contending for best player in the world in 2023, like all of that year, and even in 2022. Like he's been such an important part of this team doing well that like him having good games consistently is almost mandatory to Fnatic winning, in my opinion. And I almost feel like they've kind of gotten away from him, whether they're not giving him as much utility, whether teams have figured him out, whether he's kind of just had a drop in performance overall. I'm not totally sure. I haven't done like a super deep dive on Fnatic's overall team dynamics in the game, but it kind of feels like he's been a little bit less of the superstar that he used to be in terms of like how they've dedicated roles and resources to him because they feel so confident that like Alpha will carry this round or Leo will carry this round. I don't really know. But I would probably try and lean into that. Like clearly he's kind of hitting his stride, and I would maybe just try and like focus on that positive and really just kind of again, like there's really not that much you can do. You just have to kind of continue to preach discipline. Like, guys, we are being punished for bad decisions. Like, we know we are better players than this. We have to just like remember that why we were successful is not necessarily because we are just way better than everybody else, but it's because we did everything fundamentally well, and that allowed our exceptional mechanical prowess to take over the game. It's not the other way around. It's not your mechanics win you the game. It's your mechanics are able to shine because you do the stuff well. Like, I don't care how good you are at this game. If you peek into 3 people or you're getting util bombed because you're not giving up the space and you're too tenaciously holding the site when you know it's impossible and you're just eating 6 pieces of utility and dying, you can't use your mechanics. The reason that your mechanics can shine is when you actually make good decisions. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be tough. You can't make any changes, obviously, and I think it's really just a matter of like it's in there. Like the performance is in there. We've seen it.
Yeah.
Like it does exist. Even this season, we've seen the performance, and so you have to just kind of like somehow figure out how to do that consistently.
Yeah. If I was Fnatic, to me they've got like one very good map in Split, and I do think that like looking at their Split, like it's one of the few maps where they play something like kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
I would maybe consider like, is there something in that, right? Like, could we find some other weird stuff? Because I think a Fnatic who know what they're doing exec wise, like with a weird comp that people can't prepare for maybe so well, could be something that causes some issues. I also think one thing that maybe went under appreciated last year was the fact that, well, maybe not, but now looking back, perhaps it does. Lotus was a new map last year.
Mm-hmm.
Fnatic were the first team to really figure out a new map, and they dominated because they had this map that they knew how to play and no one else did. Essentially, at least for the first part of the season. I would obviously the new map is going to get revealed in a couple days. I would be if I was Fnatic, I would be desperate to try and figure out. Let's just scrim the hell out of the new map and figure it out as much as we can and try and get as good as we can on the new map.
Maybe they'll
So
hire
that-
Anders again to just play
Yeah,
with it.
hire Anders to
Maybe.
cook something up, whatever it is, don't care, but just work the hell out of the new map and just have that be like a big advantage going into all your map vetoes. That if you aren't banning the new map, well, we've got a free win, right? And and go from there, because I think that was obviously a big thing. Like, I mean, anytime someone didn't ban Lotus, they were 1-0 up last year. Like, that helps.
Yeah,
That
it really does.
helps.
I mean, we saw it with 100 Thieves as well. Like,
Yeah,
you don't
like,
ban
if
Bind.
you can be 1-0 up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good.
I also think one last thing that I think is maybe this is a bad take, but I just feel like people tend to have way too much emphasis on like the idea of their footage being out there and teams being able to anti-strat them. And yes, teams are getting pretty good at having like good anti plans and stuff like that. But when I watch Fnatic play Lotus, it feels like they're like over complicating the map. Like last year they had a system that was fairly straightforward and they had like a pretty straightforward game plan and teams just didn't know how to deal with it. And now everybody plays their comp. They play the map kind of how Fnatic did. And it seems like Fnatic is trying to like take their comp to like the next level and like do like constantly you'll see Durka with the Odin at tree, and it's to disguise where the Odin is and where the Raze is, because normally it would just be the Viper playing there or the Fade playing there. They need to just go back to just doing like the basic shit well. Like I don't think that if you just have a good game plan in the first place, that teams are going to automatically be able to beat you just because they know what you're doing. Like they still have to execute. And a lot of the times your initial setups that you had were setups for a reason. It's because they were the optimal setups, right? And so when you try and like change things too much and you're moving agents around to try and disguise what setup you're in, like there's always just so much fog of war for the other team that they aren't reading the game as well as you think they are. And just because they've seen 32 VODs of you play Lotus at this point doesn't mean that they're going to be able to like, oh, I know he's exactly in this corner, I'm going to like pre-aim it 100% of the time. Like that's not going to happen. There's too much going on in the game. So I feel like their Lotus has fallen off a lot, and I think it's because they're like trying to overcomplicate the map to like innovate on something that they don't really need to be innovating so much on.
Yeah, but potentially,
yeah.
potentially.
They're good at Haven as well, so that might help them as far as the map pool goes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But okay, that's FNATIC. Let's move on to Foot, who are kind of an outlier amongst these teams. I think Foot because
yeah, definitely. Would FNATIC have made it out of groups?
Oh, see, that's the thing. They lost to Foot, who you consider like to be the like Foot are like the like median point, I would say. Like if we ran the tournament like 100 times, most times FNATIC would make it out of groups, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so.
Sometimes they wouldn't, but most of the time I think they would.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, let's quickly talk about Foot then, because as I kind of say, like they aren't like the other teams that kind of went out. You know, this was a respectable showing for Foot, right? The highest that they've ever finished. They did it in a very bizarre way, I would say, where on certain maps, like, you know, we're talking about the FNATIC game, like Foot were good. Like, I mean, they were good against FNATIC those last two maps. Like, you know, like everything that was good about Foot was like, wow, look at that. And then they come and play Team Heretics, and it's like a different team turns up, and they're awful. They're awful in that. And so, like, it's like, what is going on? You know, they got absolutely rolled by 100 Thieves the first game of the playoffs. They then, you know, come back and like that's the thing. You get rolled by 100 Thieves. You got rolled on the first map against FNATIC. You then just wake up and turn up for two maps against FNATIC and play well, and then you go back to just completely sleeping, and go out to Team Heretics, you know, without making any noise really, in a sloppy way.
Yeah.
Very weird run from Foot here overall. Again, one that they can be, you know, fairly pleased with on the whole, I think. You know,
they
making
beat
it that
Lev
far.
13-1 and looked like the best team in the world for a map.
Yeah, that's but that's kind of weird because I like Foot and EMEA. I actually feel like we're kind of more steady than most EMEA teams, to be honest. You know, you take a look at like their group stage. You know, they beat Liquid 2-0, they beat Carmine Core 2-1. Okay, Vitality beat them 2-1, but then they 2-0 FNATIC, they 2-0 BBL. Like they were pretty steady, I think, on the whole.
Yeah.
Throughout EMEA. At least in the kind of group stage. So to get like this team that's just like just completely wildly different, and of course your system. For those of you who don't know, who haven't been following
the
Elevated
meme.
system, Elevated created a system for his pick'ems that led him to be near the top of the world after group stage.
Yep.
And the system loved Foot. It was based on, you know, map win percentages and all of that kind of stuff. and it loved Foot, did the system, and thought Foot would finish second in this tournament, just behind GenG.
Yep.
And after Foot beat FNATIC, it was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are they actually gonna do this? But no, they did not. And so rest in peace, Elevated system. Will the system 2.0 be ready for champs?
I'm gonna try. I know a couple of the things that I did wrong, and one of it was sample size. I gave Foot way too many points for their Ascent, which they'd only played one time. I didn't. I like. It was like one of the last things that I did, and I was looking at it, and I looked back at it, and I'm like, wait, I have them rated with like insane amounts of points for a map that they only played one single time. That's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, like if Foot was playing as well as they did against Lev, there's no reason that they couldn't have beat these teams. Like
they have it in them.
They have it in them to make that run. But and it is so weird. You mentioned it, like they did look, it was like, yeah, they had like off maps during the regular season in Split 1, but it wasn't like the whole series overall was always like, yep, they're good. They're like a good team. Yeah. They're solid. They're beating teams they should. They're playing very close games against the best teams in the league. They seem to be one of those teams, and I don't know. At this event, it was literally just like flip a coin per map, and like I don't know, against Heretics in this last series that they played. I mean, honestly, some of the worst Valorant I've watched, specifically on Sunset. Like, the team is about to execute, J just like dies randomly by himself. Like, he's the lurk, right? His entire job is to come in late, shoot some people in the back. But it was almost like they were using him as like a fake. Like, he's distracting everybody so that the execute can get through the choke point. And I'm just like, this is clearly not correct. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why J is constantly dying alone. But this is really not working. And poor CNED. I mean,
we were laughing.
Poor CNED was just being sent to the wolves. He's just in through the choke point. There's 4 people fighting him. He's stunned. He's blind. His teammates are just twiddling their thumbs in the fucking B main, not shooting the trip for him, just letting him get mowed down constantly. And he still managed the top frag. So good on you, CNED.
Yeah, he had such a just one of those games where like nothing seems to go right for you, and he still did okay, as you say. But it was funny, like, because he, like, if ever there was like an unlucky kill, like, someone random spammed or whatever, it was always CNED dying as well. It was always CNED, like, oh, they spammed through the smoke, CNED died. It's just like it's just he couldn't get away from it.
It's like a random Guardian bullet. It's just insta headshot.
Yeah. So a bit unlucky for him, but on the whole, I think can probably again see this as like a pretty decent result. Hope to be here for champs, and just look to go. Maybe this is one of those situations. Obviously, they did make some tournaments last year, but they haven't been deep in a tournament like this. Maybe I think they did make a playoffs, but maybe they just need a bit more experience in this kind of environment, and going at this stage. But yeah. They did fairly well on the whole, considering.
Yeah. I mean, along the way to success, you're gonna fail a bunch. This could just be one of the stepping stones, like we saw with many other teams in the past. They make a slightly deeper run, they lose. They make a slightly deeper run, they lose. Finally, they're in the top 3. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, or you could end up like EDG, which is what everyone expected them to do.
Yeah,
and then they didn't. Anyway, final team that got eliminated here to talk about. A team that I think...
Sorry, I know I keep interrupting you. Foot need to figure out their map vetoes. Their map vetoes are fucking brain damaged. Like, they're actually always picking maps that don't make sense to them. Like, oh my god, I was constantly just like, oh, why are you picking this map? Why are you picking this side? What are we doing, guys? You're making the game so much harder for yourself. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Paper Rex are not a team that many would have expected that we were going to talk about being eliminated at this point in the tournament. The pre-tournament favorites, I think.
For me.
Most people. Okay. Well, I didn't pick them to win it either. But Paper Rex out in 5th, 6th, which I mean, when was the last time they did that bad in a tournament? Other than lock-in, they haven't done that bad at a tournament, right? Since partnerships began. And even before that, when did they...
like Copenhagen or Reykjavik or something like that, maybe?
Copenhagen, they finished 2nd.
So Reykjavik, I think, then.
Man, that's great. Like, if you don't count lock-in... In fact, I'm gonna go back. What happened in the champs prior? What happened in the prior champs?
So
they lost in the group stage of that champs. Okay, so
okay.
that's the last one. Oh, they lost in that group stage of that champs to Team Liquid. That is they lost to Leviathan and Liquid. Huh.
The
Things like yeah.
Wow.
That is crazy.
Okay.
But okay. So since partnerships began, again, if you don't count lock-in where I think they self-admittedly trolled, this is their worst performance. But why did this happen? Tell me. Why let we diagnose FNATIC. Tell me about Paper X. Why?
Okay. So I noticed that you put out a video today that says Paper X will never win an event. And I have been planning a video called Paper X will never win an event as well.
Oh, sorry.
So you've stolen my thunder. It's okay. I mean, I have a very specific thing that I think they're doing wrong, in my opinion.
Mine was more broad, I guess.
And I think it's basically kind of a twofold thing that really just has like one main root cause. I think in the past when they've been successful, they've always been the aggressive team. They've always been the W Gaming. That's their entire brand. We know that's why we like watching them play. But they have always been able to mix up some slow stuff in there. They've always been able to be like, it's like 7 slam rounds in a row into just like a nothing. Where the fuck are they? And then all of a sudden they come out of nowhere and just like punch you in the face, and they continue to steamroll after that. And from what I've seen this year, starting with the Monette roster, but more specifically, it's been even worse since they got GenG. Every round is just a 5-man hit. Every single attack round is just 5 players running it in. Like there is no variety at all to their game plan. Just slam, 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 slam. Literally, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we're slamming insta. Sometimes we're slamming at 15 seconds. Sometimes we're slamming at 30 seconds in the round. But it's always 5 players, always hitting. There's no lurk. There's no other option. There's no, because like when Paper X would, I mean, everybody knew that they were just slamming when they were good, but there was always this like, okay, we're going in, we've been stalled by utility, and now we're instantly pivoting into another hit into the other site. But now they're not doing that because they don't have anybody like as an anchor point. So they have no map control. So it's just 5 players hitting a site, and if they get stalled, they feel uncomfortable to like run to the other site because they don't know what's going on anywhere else. So they just like go quiet, and then they re-hit into 4 people again. So their attack has definitely been less like explosive because of that, but their defense is where they really, really struggle this year. And it's because they have a similar mentality of like, we must go fight, but when it doesn't go well, they go from we must go fight to we're going to play as far back as possible and give up the entire map. And they have like literally 2 speeds on defense, and it's like we're running it down and we don't have another plan, or it's we like just basically are too afraid to take space, and the other team, and we have no information because we don't play sentinels. We don't play informational agents at all. We just play hard explosive agents. And so if we give up the entire map, then we have no idea what's going on in the round, and it's insanely easy for the other team to play against us. So yeah, I'll be doing like a very long kind of deep dive into this with lots of examples, but that's been my diagnosis of them this year, is that they have lost the versatility, and it was like a small amount of versatility, but they've lost the versatility that made them great in the past.
Yeah. See, it's interesting. For my video today, I went back and watched the upper final of Champs last year, Pearl against EG.
Hmm.
What a great map. I mean, you go back at that, what a great map of Valorant that was just in general. I just
Uh,
went back to watch it just to remind myself, like, what does peak Paper Rex look like? Right?
mm,
Like, what is this 5 players playing at their best look like? And it does not look like Master Shanghai.
yeah,
It does
yeah.
not look like Master Shanghai at all. There is honestly, it actually shocked me because I've heard a lot of people talk about, this has kind of been a thing this year of like, oh, the teams, this year they aren't as good as like the best teams from last year. And I was kind of on that train of like, oh, we're gradually getting there, right? Like some of these teams are getting there. We're slowly getting there, towards these best teams. But like watching EG versus Paper X play that Pearl, it was like, oh my god, this
Yeah.
is so good.
Both
Like
teams are
these
insane.
teams are
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
Like unbelievably good. And obviously that was a super close map and it was super hype as well. But just watching it, like it is like watching a different team. And they are still aggressive, but like you say, there's multiple moments where, Forsaken catches a good lurk timing and kills someone on a great lurk, or calls the team back or something like that. Like he's playing Killjoy on Pearl there. Like there are moments like that. And when you were talking there about the defense sides, I couldn't just help think like their bind like is just screaming to me like of that exact problem of what you're talking about, where like their bind, they have to change it. Something
Mhm.
has to, and I'm not talking about I'm not talking about something,
It's something.
but
Yeah.
something has to change on
Yeah.
bind because it's exactly what you say, and it's almost the exact opposite way that you play defense bind, right? Where it's like they are either pushing out or they are super scared, which is like
Yes.
the opposite of bind. Like
Yeah.
you don't like pushing out. I mean, it's not an awful idea all the
It's
time,
like
but
a
it's not something.
once per
Yeah,
half, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
you do it like once per half, right? Because it's not like the best way of playing bind defense side, but then you also don't want to play like super far back and just give all the space up either. That's like the
Yeah.
opposite of bind as well, right?
Yeah.
You kind of like, slowly maybe work your way back and then, contest as you go. But it is exactly what you say, that they have the two speeds of like, we're either aggro W keying you and probably losing because people expect it, or we're super scared and people just walk in on us and we don't know what's going on because we've got no info and we lose because we're having to
Yeah.
play like full retakes now, not flood retakes, not retakes with any space that we still hold on to, just
Yeah.
full retake
Because we
retakes.
guessed wrong and we're on the other side of
Yeah,
the map. Yeah.
yeah. So like it's tough for them, and I think a lot of people in their mind, and I said this in my video as well, that like Icebox is in their mind, and they lost Icebox because there was many clutch moments that they lost, maybe
Mhm.
because they were too aggressive,
Yeah.
right? That's why they got eliminated, really, because really when you look back at some of the rounds that they lost, it's like, bro, you lost in overtime, and this is how you lost.
Yeah.
Like there were so many rounds where it's like, bruh, really? You lost another one here? And yeah, they are, there's many moments. I mean, there are too many to count, right? When I was going back through them, it's like, guys, it's a 5v3 and you've got a Killjoy lockdown.
Yeah.
Like, all you have to do is live the Killjoy lockdown, and you can unplug your mouse and keyboard if you want, and they're not going to have enough time to kill you
Yeah.
all and defuse the spike. Like,
Yeah.
just all you gotta do is live. You just gotta live. And I'm watching like everyone just like the lockdown goes down, and it's like Forsaken, who's in a safe position, then pushes forward to die. And then after that, two separate players go different ways on yellow and both take 1v1s and die. And it's like, guys, please. And that was a part of it. There was also a part of it that they lost multiple of those rounds as well to they lined up and died, right?
Yeah.
Which you could argue like is unlucky, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Sometimes it's just unlucky. Like I specifically remember the Asuna one where it's a 1v3 initially and they misplayed that, but Divide dies. It's a 1v2. They see where he is. They try and double swing. Unfortunately, Asuna hasn't moved at all, and they just so happen if he moves at all, they aren't lined up, right? But he's
Yeah.
just exactly stayed in the same spot, and they
Yeah.
perfectly lined up for him. It's like, well, that's just unlucky, right? Like,
Yep.
there's nothing you can do about that. You tried to double swing. You tried to play it right. He just happened to have the perfect angle on you. But to me, like there are, to me there was, and again watching that Pearl VOD, and you might want to do that by the way, to kind of for when you make your video, just to like have something to
Remind
compare it
myself.
against.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you'll see like, oh, obviously there's still mistakes in there, but like just the synergy is just on point,
Mhm.
right? Like all of the round plans make sense, and they
Mhm.
do when they do stuff, they do it together, and then they like people. Like it's that thing of like, as we were talking about with Alfia as well, like people make hero plays when they need to, right? When
Mhm.
it's like, I need to take this timing, otherwise we won't win the round, so I'm going to take it, right? But they don't do it all the time. The round that I showed in my video was like, something finds a kill with an op down B long, and then he pushes forward, but he still has his dash online, and he just edges forward ever so slightly and just keeps edging forward, then finds a second kill, dashes away, and then he thinks about going forward, but he doesn't. He runs all the way back and plays it super safe.
Mhm.
We're in a 5v3, plays it super safe. And I was watching that round and I'm thinking like, this is the round I'll show, because if that was Shanghai, he is 100% sending it forward. He is
Maybe
100.
not even edging into that second kill. Maybe just like knife
Yeah.
out running to try and rotate early. Like,
Yeah, like
yeah.
I was just thinking, like, there's no way that team that I just watched play the Icebox. There's no way they play like that. And then
Yeah.
even they get into a 5v1 and Demon One kills something, and then they get into a 4v1. And I'm thinking, and I'm watching Forsaken, he's alone on B at that time that it's a 4v1. I'm thinking, if this is that Icebox game, he's wide swinging out here. Right, but does he in that situation? Absolutely not. He tucks back in,
Yeah.
waits for everyone to come. They just keep sending util at Demon One. They don't even swing until they're all there, and then they swing as a 4. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm watching that, and I'm like, well, there's proof, right?
Yeah.
That like they don't have to play in this style of like everyone just run out on their own, and I'm gonna win the round, and oh no, we lost the round. Oh, unlucky, we lost the clutch. Like they don't have to, and if you watch that game, you will see they show you that they can play with discipline, that they can do that. But to me, like an even bigger part was there are multiple times where there is util available that's not being used for when we're doing something, right?
Yeah.
Like if something is dashing in, there's no util other than
Their
him just dashing in.
their number one play this year is dry swinging. Like legitimately, that
Yeah,
is the play call, is dry swing.
yeah, and I think like it like I've always said that Paper Rex, they think that aggression is what makes them good, but it's not. Their team play is the thing that makes them good. And then the aggression just enhances that because it means that teams don't have a chance to react. Right? When your team play is so fast and so quick, and really you could say that about, all the best teams, right? Like EG last year, right? It was
Yeah.
the same thing. They wouldn't necessarily do it all the time straight away, but when EG are playing at their best last year, it's because we're chaining 4 bits of util together like that. And it's
Yeah.
happening straight away on you, and you don't have time to react because no one can react that fast to 4 bits of different util from 4 different agents, all synergizing and hitting you like that, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard when
And
you
they were
don't
doing this stuff on
expect
the
it.
fly. People thought
Yeah, when it's
they
off
were planning
random
it.
timing
Yeah.
on the fly, like,
Yeah.
and everyone's doing that. That's almost
Yeah.
impossible to play against, and that's why they were so good.
Yeah.
And Paper Rex were that as well.
Yep.
But now they're not. It's like you say, they have very obvious game plans in terms of their macro. Where I mean, on Icebox, like you could see it. 100 Thieves were they were rotating.
They were
Oh, you heard someone? Go, go,
insta
run,
rotating.
run, run!
Insta
Like
rotating. Yeah.
instant. Like there was so like if anyone was lurking on the other side of the map, like it would have been a free round, right?
Yeah, because
It's a free
and that's the
site
thing. There
every
was
time.
nobody lurking ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
And I remember during that game as well thinking like, because Paper Rex were kind of 100 Thieves had somewhat of a similar problem, I think, where they like I was just thinking like guys, like just destroy the turret in mid.
Yeah.
And it was because 100 Thieves in one round, they destroyed the turret in mid for like the first time. I think it might have been the last round of the game. It might have been overtime or something. It was certainly towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
And I was like, they finally destroyed the turret. Oh my god. And Paper Rex are then like, then they go and hit A as a full 5, 100 Thieves. And Paper Rex are like looking around, like in the dark, like just, where is this guy? They must be looking in mid because they destroyed the turret. And no one at that point had in the entire round. I'm like, how has it taken us this long to figure out, like, if all we have to do is destroy a turret and they will not rotate straight away. And it's like, Paper Rex never figured that out either. It's just like, guys, what are we doing? And I do think that, again, Paper Rex, in these games that they play against worse teams, it's like FNATIC, right? Where they are getting conditioned to feel rewards from their stupid plays because it
Mm,
works against worse teams. But when you get to this level, it does not work against these teams. And another thing that we have to consider for Paper X going forward as well, and I mentioned this in my video, is Raze is getting nerfed. And
yeah,
depending on how big that nerf is,
yeah.
they might be in trouble.
They
But
might,
I do want to say as well though, it might help them long term. Because in my opinion, one reason why Paper X struggle in best of fives is because their map pool is never that good. Because on any map where Jing doesn't play Raze, they just aren't that good. Like they have never been good at like
I
all four, I'd say, of these maps have never been in the top of their pool, and or even like in the top three of their map pool, like for the entirety of this team kind of being a team that's at least half decent. Like Icebox is always to the middle or bottom of their pool. Breeze is always. Ascent is always. Haven was always. Like these are often the maps that they have to permaban or whatever because you have a raise one trick essentially. I know he can play Sage and their Icebox is like okay now, but it's still not one of their better maps. It's okay, it's serviceable, I guess.
yeah. In preparation for this video, I had to look at Jing's tracker just because I was curious. I was like, because I know if you look at Forsaken's tracker, it's like he's played 12 agents every act.
Yeah.
You look at Jing's tracker, I go to all time, all acts, over 2,000 games of Raze, over 1,000 games of Reyna, 300 games of Jet, 275 games of Phoenix, 146 games of Sage. Nothing else remotely close to 100. So, like, even in ranked, he's literally playing two agents.
Yeah.
Like, so.
And
yes.
one of them is not very good.
and one of them is Reyna, which is a problem. 1,000 games of Reyna is unhinged. That's like, I mean, okay. So here's the thing. Like, yes, he probably can play other agents. He certainly needs to expand his agent pool, especially with the Raze nerfs coming.
But that's why I think it might be a good thing. Like the Raze nerf might help them because like Raze will still probably be good enough maybe on some maps. But then if it forces him to learn a Yoru or a Neon or a Jet, and then something can flex onto Breach or Gecko or whatever else, right? On that might help them because then their map pool might just be better, full stop, right? Like that, it might just help across the board on non-Raze maps. Paper X might just be better then.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I'm gonna give
Neon buff. What if they buff Neon heavy?
It seems like a Jing type of agent, to be honest, like just crazy movement stuff. I mean, but who knows? So I'm gonna give away most of my video just because I feel like it needs to be said in this discussion. I went fairly deep on like looking at various things. If you look at the map pool that Paper X have since something took over for Benkai, they are very bad at big maps.
Yeah.
Like overall. Sense. Breeze is their worst map, and we saw it. Like it was awful. The Breeze that we saw against 100 Thieves was awful. Icebox, they actually I think they have like they played like 6 games or 7 games and they have like a win rate on that map. Lotus, one of their most played maps, not good. They have a losing win rate on Lotus, and it's like one of their most played maps. What else is a big map? Haven, honestly, not that good since they have something. The maps that they do the best on are the congested small maps with a good rotation corridor through middle. Pearl being one of them. Like that map, I think a lot of people think that map is big, but actually for the defense, as long as you control that middle corridor, the rotation is pretty good, and there's lots of like flow from one site to the next, which allows them to like redirect their attack. Whereas on Breeze, it's like, oh, we got stopped here. It's like 25 seconds to get to the other site. Same thing on Icebox. Same thing on Haven. And basically all of their best maps are the ones where it's like really congested, and if you hit the site, you can just like blow the other team out of the water. Or if you're playing defense, you can gamble easily and not get owned by it because you're not that far away from the other site. And so if you actually look at their map pool, when they play these bigger maps, especially because they play maps without, or they play comps without a lot of info, they have to gamble. And if you're on Breeze and you're gambling 4 people on B because you don't know what's going on the other side of the map, and they hit A site, you lose the round.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't play the game like that. And so they are really struggling with these bigger maps that require them to spread out their resources and don't allow them to play fast and reactive, or require them to gamble a lot. And it's something that you can kind of fix with comps. It's something you can kind of fix with some playstyle stuff. But it's like a very clear trend that whenever they're on maps that are very hard to play defense on because they require a slower pace or more info or more kind of like control of the game, they're basically just flipping a coin every round, and it's very hard to win the game consistently when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'm just looking at some of their win rates now, like going back to the start of 2023, and it's like most of the maps are still positive, you know, as you would expect because they're paper Rex, right? So they still beat the bad teams, like,
Yeah.
you know, no matter what, right? Obviously, that's not really what we're looking at here, because yeah, they can beat the bad teams no matter what, but it is those maps. Really, the only map, like you say, like Pearl is a map that they did pretty well on. That's the kind of one exception to Jing. Like that's the one map where Jing doesn't play Raze that they actually were good on at some point. Uh,
But also look at
yeah,
their comp, and I
yeah,
really do think that the Sky nerf has destroyed this team in a way that is
yeah.
not being
That's a fair
respected,
point.
because the info that this team always relied on was Sky. Sky was
Yeah,
their
that's a good
primary
point.
info tool, and now they're having to play Sova, and they don't feel comfortable with Sova. They don't really play Fade. They don't play a lot of Sentinels a lot of the time either. And so the fact that they don't have this bird constantly telling them where people are and allowing them to gamble correctly, they're basically playing with like without the ability to see what's going on the other side of the map. And so I think the
Okay.
Sky nerf has like really fucked them a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so we talked about it for Fnatic. I mean, I think most people, and I'm sure you and I would probably agree, the Paybreaks will obviously make champs. You would have thought. If not, then it's a disaster. Uh, but they'll make champs. But do you have hope for this team that they can, get to a level like last champs? Can they reach that level again? And because they probably will need to be at that level, to threaten to win champs. You would have thought. So what do we
Yeah.
think?
I mean, I think it's possible, but I
Hmm.
think they need to like understand. I just don't know if they know what the problem is.
Yeah.
Is kind of the sense that I get, because they seem
well,
to just be
well,
doing the same thing.
well, just watch this podcast and you'll be fine, Paper Rex. We've
I
just
mean,
diagnosed you for 20
and
minutes.
and I mean the thing is, like, I'm sure they're trying, and like I'm sure they have conversations, and hopefully they're having conversations similar to stuff like this, and maybe we don't know what we're talking about, but it seems very obvious to me as somebody who's watched like thousands of games of Valorant at this point. It's like there's some very clear things that I'm seeing consistently, and it's like, I don't know, like obviously the players are insane. They're very, very good. One of the recommendations I'm going to make in my video, again, I'm just giving away my entire video so I don't have to do it maybe, but I think they need to put Jing and something on agents that can self-enable through information. You actually look at their map pool right now. The best maps are when something is playing Gecko, because he can get information for himself and make plays for himself. And Jing's best maps are when he's on Raze, because he can get information for himself. Anytime they rely on their supportive players to help enable their duelists, they're losing the game, because they don't have the Sky that they used to have. The Sky was so pivotal to them, and I think really if they give their players kind of like the initiators, and then they continue to play aggressive stuff, I think they'll actually do pretty well. And one last thing that I'll say is that right now their executes basically are like, because everybody knows they're coming, they're having to use an extra amount of utility to actually make their executes strong. And so by the time they get to post plant, they're basically planting the spike and they have like a flash, and that is it. Like a single flash is all of their post plant utility. And you can go back if you watch their games at this tournament, you'll see when they plant the spike, they have never have more than like one molly and one flash. And if you're playing super hyper aggressive, get the spike down as fast as possible, you want to be able to fall off and play post plant cringe molly stuff. Or you have to play aggressive and fight for more space. And right now, because they have no second option, because they have no utility to like counter util when the other team goes into the retake, their only option for post plant is to play overly aggressive, which is why they're losing all these rounds. Like the 5v3 that you're talking about, they're losing every round because the only option that's available to them is to play hyper aggressive, play super forward, try and push for extra space, and everybody knows that's what they're going to do because there's no other game plan.
Yeah.
So yeah. I would honestly change a lot of their comps. I would be putting like, I'd be leaning into like fortification type stuff for when you plant the spike. Like their best maps are the ones where they have a sage and a killjoy on it, so they can like molly and like stall the attackers from or the defenders from retaking. Their best maps are when they have, again, like the duelists being able to self-enable themselves, and like it's really just that simple. From like a comp standpoint, like you don't have to change too much, in my opinion. Their playstyle can still work, but they have to pick different agents. Otherwise, they're just going to be doing the same thing over and over again.
There you go. Paper Rex. I'm with you. I asked the question, can they still like maybe win champs or something like that? I'm sure a lot of people watching would like right now, because we're in the malaise of feeling down about Paper Rex, would probably say like no. But I think the truth is that like they definitely can find that. And I do think that last season there was a big development from Tokyo to champs. Now that'll be I'm interested to see if that will be the case this year though, because of course last year if you made Tokyo, a lot of those teams just got the time off to just prepare for champs. They were already in champs, of course.
Yeah.
And they just had full time to prepare.
Yeah, the second split will be really interesting.
Yeah, so will teams improve, or because they have to play games that do matter, maybe we won't see that level of improvement, which will be interesting, but we'll have to see. But yeah, Paper Rex, I mean, like, I always get annoyed when they lose, because when they lose, and particularly when they lost like on Icebox, Breeze, it was like, okay, it was your permaban, you didn't want to play bind, I get it. It wasn't good, but you can excuse that. But then the Icebox was a particularly difficult loss.
Yeah.
Let's put it like that. It was a difficult loss, but I still have faith that, like, in reality, 100 Thieves, we'll see how they do, but they very well could be the winners of this event, right? And then it's like, oh well, you just you had a bad game against G2, and then you lost to a good team. Like, unlucky. But let's talk about those final 4 teams, shall we?
Yeah, shit.
Got 4 left.
I just realized that we spent an hour and a half talking about stuff that hasn't even, it's all past stuff that nobody cares about anymore.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's make this a bit more brief then. So the final 4 teams, we have a couple games here. Let's start with the lower game. So this is I don't even know what this game is called. I was about to say the lower final, but it's not the lower final.
Yeah,
it's whatever. Lower round, whatever. 100 Thieves versus Team Heretics. An interesting game. I'm kind of glad we get to see this game. Obviously, both teams have a bit of time to prepare, which I think will be super interesting for this game, because I think both of our minds, both of these teams kind of have a map where it's like, probably want to ban that kid. And it's not a great map for either side. So I think that, like, the other team, right, like Heretics Bind, not great. 100 Thieves Sunset, not great. So it's going to be an interesting map, Vito, because
Heretics Bind is actually one of their better maps. 71% win since the
I'm gonna tell you right now, you are looking at stats that are not telling you the truth of what's happening today. Okay. Because Team Heretics Bind, yes, was pretty decent earlier on in the season. I'm telling you right now. I mean, they're playing against 100 Thieves as well.
Yeah.
They did beat Foot. That was don't bring up the Foot game to me. Don't bring up. They look, I don't like their bind. I'm not sure that they love their bind. They banned it against G2 in the rematch against G2. The first time that they didn't ban Acend. So I don't think that they love their bind either. And especially against 100 Thieves, think we agree. Just ban bind. It's
Yeah.
just going to be easier for you. Just ban bind. You'll have a
Yeah.
better chance. But what do you think then overall this game? 100 Thieves, Heretics. Who do you favor? Why do you favor them?
I'm gonna
How do
reference.
you favor them?
I'm gonna reference the system for this one.
Oh, here we go.
I just think that Heretics have kind of a bad map pool. I think.
Okay, I can
I
somewhat agree with that.
I think not being able to play Ascent is problematic. I think, like you said, they're gonna get Sunset banned against them. It's their best map. It's actually very interesting, this series, because 100 Thieves, I think, have been overrated as far as how good they are, because their bind has been so dominant and they got to play bind all the way through playoffs in Americas and the start of this tournament as well. I think it's kind of one of those things where it's like, of course, 100 Thieves look insane because they're literally playing a map that nobody else plays as well as them in every series. So we get to see them win a map dominantly in every series, and then all they have to do is just like find a win on one of the other maps. Because if you look at 100 Thieves map pool, it's also not that great. So this is one of those things where it's like Sunset gets banned, Bind gets banned, and now where do you find those wins? Where do they come from? And
Holy, I did not realize this. I'm just going back through all, like, if you go back to their entire America's run,
it's not good.
like,
It's literally just bind, and then
they
some other
lose to
map.
Sentinels week 1. They don't play bind. They lose 2-0. They beat GT 2-0. They win bind. They beat Cloud9 2-0. They play bind. They win.
Yeah.
Against Crew, they don't play bind. They lose 2-1. They play
Yep.
NRG. They play bind. They win. They
Yep.
play Loud first.
I'm telling you, dude.
Playoffs. They play bind. They win. They play Lev. They play bind. They win. They play G2. They play bind. This is the one that they did lose. They did lose
Yep.
one game of bind to G2, but they won the other 2 maps. And then they play G2 again and they play bind. They win. Like, that is crazy looking back. But other than that one G2 game, like, literally, it's if we play bind, we win. If we don't, we lose. That is crazy.
Yes. This is what I'm saying. Like, they're a little bit of like a false, it's like a false interpretation of how good they are because they're playing the singular map that they're insanely good
They're
at.
literally starting 1-0 up the whole time.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously this team is pretty good. They are a good team. I'm not going to take too much away from them, but I am very curious because I think it's like I almost wish they were playing one of the other 2 teams in this match because I feel like Heretics is the best possible matchup just because they are a younger team that is playing with the stand-in. We've seen a little bit of cracks in Heretics' performance this tournament where it's like sometimes they're just a little bit off and like all of their players are just a little bit off. And so I think if 100 Thieves were to play against G2 or GenG, they would lose. So I'm going to favor them in this matchup because I think they are slightly better than Heretics individually. Slightly. Very slightly better than Heretics. And I think the IGLing is a little bit better from 100 Thieves. But I could see this going either way. And I really hope that we get Sunset ban, Bind ban, first phase. And then who the fuck knows what happens after that.
Yeah. After that, it's like flip a coin. But that is the thing. I think that's why this game is going to be interesting from at least a standpoint of like they got a couple days to prepare. And so you like 100 Thieves have kind of been permabanning Lotus for a while. Like, you know, they've got a couple days to prepare their Lotus, you know, for Team Heretics. And Heretics have got like a couple days to prepare their Ascent attack side, which obviously fell apart against G2. Like, you know, because, again, they should be banning those maps. If either of those teams doesn't ban those maps, they are in... Well, they're starting 1-0 down, right? Like, if those teams... And if both teams don't, that would be bizarre. We basically are
That'd
just...
be some
whatever
crazy
map
mind
3
games.
is, it's like, whatever map 3 is, you better be good at map 3. Because it's going there. It's 1-1, and we're going there. Almost certainly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be super interesting. But, yeah, this could be... Like, Heretics, for me... I think particularly early on in the tournament, like in my mind, early on in the tournament, it was literally, and we saw this in the first G2 game that they played, that it's like, if you ban Sunset, you'll win. Like, because they just don't have, you know, especially with the stand-in, they got there late, they had no time to scrim. Like they just didn't have any other, like if you ban Sunset against them, it doesn't matter if they pick your permaban, like you'll be fine. now I do think, especially with these extra days, and as they've gone forward, I do think it's possible that they have got maybe a couple of the maps that they can feel at least good about, right? If not amazing about, that they can still feel like, okay, we're okay on this at least. So maybe that'll be good enough. But I do think that 100 Thieves. Yeah, I think this is like a 55-45. I would not be shocked to see Heretics win because I do think, like, I've been maybe even a little, like, I had really high stocks for 100 Thieves coming in.
Mm.
I think I've been a little underwhelmed at this tournament by 100 Thieves, personally. I think.
Unless they play bind.
Yeah, and look, I will say that like Paper Rex did ban bind against 100 Thieves as well, right? Like, so this is a mistake that everyone made against EG last year at the
Yeah.
second international tournament. No one banned Fracture against them, and that carried EG to the final.
Yeah.
They won it against everyone pretty much in that tournament. So at least like teams are learning, like, hey,
Yeah.
give this team the respect, ban bind against them. It's your chances are better off. So that's good at least. But yeah, I have been a little underwhelmed with not with the individual play, I would say, because we have seen some really good individual. Cryo I think popped off in that bind game.
Bang has
We
been
saw,
insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've seen Bang be very, very good. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit harsh on them because that first, but then again, am I being harsh on them? Because in all likelihood, like they maybe should have been eliminated, to be real. So maybe I'm not being too harsh on them. And obviously they did
Yeah.
dominate that fuck game, but like just some of the team play elements, I feel like, you know, haven't been maybe as good as I thought they were, during the Americas playoffs, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's because they couldn't play bind. I don't know. So yeah, who are you picking? I'm gonna do a 55-45 coin.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm picking 100 Thieves just because I think the experience of Boostio, having been in these situations, Boostio and Zix, I have a little bit more faith in them to be able to like prepare the team and carry them through. But I think I agree with you at 55-45, maybe even closer, like 52-48.
Okay, well, I'm gonna flip a coin. It came up heads. Heads for Heretics. Heads. There you go. 100
Okay.
tails or team heads. It landed heads. Heretics win.
Okay. Fair.
Is what I'll say. And then our upper final, GenG versus G2. Now, spoiler alert to everyone in chat. Both me and Elevated picked GenG to win this event.
Yep.
So I have a feeling that we might already have a preference for who we think is going to win this game.
Yep.
Because unlike 100 Thieves and Team Heretics, GenG are the only team in the world, and I mean, this is a mega advantage, particularly in a tournament format where there isn't a ton of time to prep. It's a mega advantage to have a complete map pool.
Yep.
Right? Even if you're not amazing at every map, like for instance 100 Thieves, amazing at bind, but maybe weaknesses elsewhere, right? GenG are just like, they might not even be like super amazing at any one map, but they are just decent to great on like all 7.
Yep.
And that is just such a mega advantage, and it means
It's
that you can ban, and
so powerful.
and they ban for each opponent as well. They don't have a perma ban.
Yep.
It's just so hard to beat them. And we have seen in a lot of their series, they have lost maps. They have lost a map in every game other than 100 against 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
So, they lose maps. But that's the thing. Their overall map pool, even if you've got one map where you're better than them on, there are the other 2 that are in the pool, you're probably not. And I do think that G2, who have been I mean, that Team Heretics game was obviously very weird. That they that they are getting stomped.
Yeah.
They are about to go to the lowers, and in a fashion of being absolutely stomped.
The Ascent game. Yeah.
And then they pull it back like the biggest comeback or one of the biggest comebacks in international VCT history,
Yep.
and then just become the stomper. One of the more bizarre games probably ever witnessed.
Yep.
Uh, but here they are. Despite that, I mean, again, it's so funny to me that like if just a couple rounds go other the way, like our thoughts on G2 and Heretics are completely different. Because Heretics, we just stomped G2 in the rematch. We're going to the upper finals. We're feeling amazing. Like everything's good. And G2, who knows what? And maybe they go straight out after that. They just got absolutely rolled. Like, oh my god. Or even if they scrape through, like, oh no, they're playing against 100 Thieves. Who then they're just clearly not better than, right? They just got stomped a couple games ago against a good team. Like 100 Thieves will deal with them. Like, but instead, here we are. Where are you on G2? Because I think we know where we are on GenG. Where are you on G2?
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, the map pool definitely goes advantage GenG. Just because G2, their icebox has been awful. It's been really bad, and they have a couple other slightly weaker maps. Like their sunset is kind of questionable. But their map pool is pretty good. Like as far as the 4 teams remaining, the best map pools are GenG and G2 probably.
God, I was just going through G2's game and I saw G2 versus T1, and I was like, when did they play T1? T1 were in this tournament. Remember them?
I don't actually. Who is that team?
That's
Um,
crazy.
but yeah, I mean, so I think I think it's a little closer than maybe people might think.
Mm.
I do think that there is, the map pool. GenG's very likely going to pick Icebox against them. So it should be pretty GenG favored. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little worried at how resilient G2 are. I think there is a chance. Like, for example, Acend has been one of GenG's best maps for the entire season. They're 10-2 on it this year. G2 are 5-1 on that map. And after the comeback that we saw, I would be pretty hesitant to pick Acend into G2. I don't want them to start on defense after they just rattled off 11 straight rounds against Heretics on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that maybe we get to a point where, okay, Icebox goes for GenG probably, but then we're playing maybe Lotus for G2. They felt really good on Lotus. That's a good GenG map, but there's been a little bit of shakiness here and there. They lost to FNATIC most recently. Split is one of GenG's worst maps in their pool. And it's not necessarily great for G2, but it's not bad. I feel like we could have like kind of a weird map pool in this.
Yeah.
And I don't really know where it's going to go, other than I'm pretty sure we're going to get an icebox. Maybe we'll just get a terrible map pool, and it will just be like Breeze, icebox. But yeah, man, I don't know. Is G2 going to pull out Sunset even though they haven't been very good because they think GenG aren't that good at Sunset? That's possible.
It could go a lot of ways, and especially with GenG, like GenG, I think GenG will probably ban Split. I think that's the map that they'll ban, even though it's like not G2's like best map, but they're like okay at it, and it's like one of GenG's worst, as you said. But like, because like on the other maps that you're bringing up, like Ascent is a good map for both. Lotus is a good map for both, right? Like,
Yeah.
So they do share some of those things as well. But that's where I do think that like, again, I think that we'll get a classic GenG 2-1 of like and we have to remember, of course, and even GenG won't have experienced this either, of course, because it wasn't really like this at Madrid. We're of course going to the big stadium, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's gonna be 18,000 people there. Other than Boostio, no one has. I don't know if Benji Fishy did, maybe in Fortnite, but in this game, other than Boostio, I don't think anyone of these players has played in a situation like that, right? With like a big crowd, and well, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how silent 18,000 people can get when GenG win it all, but you know.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess long story short, I'm gonna pick GenG. but I
Yes.
definitely would not be that surprised if there was, because like we've seen GenG get so close and fail. There is always that moment where it's like the pressure could get to them, and G2 have just been the team that does not crack. Like they just don't crack. They didn't crack at Ascension. They didn't crack earlier this year. They didn't crack in this tournament. Like they're just the team that just does not break. And that's kind of like everything. I know, like having spoken quite a bit with Josh RT, the coach, like that is their entire identity. Is like we just do not give up. We grind. We don't give a fuck what's going on. Every round is taken the exact same as the last round. It doesn't matter what the score is.
Yeah. And here they are. Here they are. It got them this far. They're definitely finishing top 3. I do have some concerns that, you know, that they could fold here to GenG. That is in my back of my mind. It's like maybe that's a possibility that GenG get rolling early.
Yeah,
That
that's also
GenG are like
possible.
a good enough team to where that doesn't matter because GenG are too good to, you know, like yeah, you can do it against Team Heretics on their, you know, permaban when they don't know how to attack, but
Right.
that's not going to happen to GenG.
Right.
You know, that you could argue GenG have played teams better than you,
Maybe they will
and
just pick a scent and they'll just roll them because
that's
they
because that would be a very GenG thing to do.
yeah.
Well, not roll them, but just like they win. You know, they just
Yeah.
win. Okay, last thing here then. We're gonna put a percentage chance that each team wins Masters Shanghai. So we
25,
both
25, 25, 25.
okay, and now I'll do mine. So we both think that GenG will win. I think that probably GenG, I'd put about 50-50.
You're putting 50% chance that GenG wins the tournament.
Yeah, because I think GenG will beat G2. And I think that GenG would double map ban against any of these other teams.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough for those other teams. Coming off a lower final where you have to play the next day, like, I feel good about GenG. I mean, I honestly, like, that's the thing. Even if you have double map ban on GenG,
Yeah.
I don't even think that's that amazing. Other than,
Yeah.
like, you know, Heretics will feel good about Sunset and 100 Thieves will feel good about Bind. But other than that, yeah. And they can't, and obviously they can't go, you know, it's only G2 who can have the double map ban if GenG don't. So I would put GenG at 50%.
Okay.
What would you put them at?
How does math work? I think I'll give them a little bit lower because I am a little worried about the mental. I'm a little worried about the pressure. So I'm gonna give them like a 40. I'll give them 40. I'll give them 10% less than you.
Okay. Okay. Now this will be interesting. I would still say next, and based off what we just said, I think we agree. I would say the next most likely is still G2
To win the event.
to win the event. Yeah.
I agree.
Obviously, just one because obviously they're in the upper finals, right?
Yeah.
They have a loss, whereas the other teams don't.
Right.
You know, like 100 Thieves and Heretics, they don't have another loss in them. Obviously, if G2 can beat GenG, then they're probably favorites to win at that point if they can win this next game. So I would say G2 is next most likely. I'm just gonna put them at like 25. I would say 1 out of 4. What say ye?
I think I'll give them 30.
Okay,
Yeah.
feeling good about G2 then.
Yeah.
So because I think a lot of people would still put 100 Thieves.
I think most people still think 100 Thieves is going to win this tournament. I
Well,
think the community sentiment is still that 100 Thieves is going to win this, but I could be wrong about that.
yeah, no, I think most people would lean GenG now, considering that they beat 100 Thieves before. But before the 100 Thieves GenG game, I think most people would have said 100 Thieves. But next, I think 100 Thieves have to be next. I would give them, like, what am I on, 75%? I would say I'd still give them 20. And maybe I'm being harsh on Heretics here, because I'm only giving Heretics 5, I guess. But I'd give still 100 Thieves 20. What say ye?
I think I'll just go 15-15 for the two of them, honestly.
Okay.
That'll put me
Still
at 100%.
some hope in Heretics.
I just think that, like, it's one of those things where Heretics, if, like, Woot is hitting and everybody's just hitting and they just, like, and they don't have the pressure, maybe because it's not the full roster. They're kind of still just like YOLOing, like playing with house money more so than any of the other teams at this point. Maybe they just roll. But obviously, I think they're the lowest percent. But I guess what that says is I'm a little bit lower on 100 Thieves than you are. Basically, is
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, for me, I'm looking at Heretics and I'm thinking like, if they make the grand final, it's either against the team that I think is the best team in GenG with a double map ban on them, or the team that's beat them twice at this event with a double map ban on them. So it's like,
True.
hmm.
True.
I don't really see it, I guess. Especially a team that I think, with a double map ban, that both those teams would be feeling pretty good about a best of 5.
Yeah.
So there it is. Cosmic Divide episode 30. This was meant to be a short one.
It was meant to be short, but we gave you an hour and 50 of free content. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you at the end of Shanghai for another episode recapping, previewing Split 2. Peace out. Have a good